Hi there, gentle souls. Welcome to Between Souls. If you're carrying pain or just need a quiet escape, you're in the right place. Grab a warm drink, find a cozy spot, and let's dive into this story together. Crystal lights danced across the grand ballroom of the Astoria Grand, a luxury hotel nestled in the heart of New York City. Soft classical music echoed gently through the air, mingling with the elegant shuffle of heels and the clink of champagne glasses. Tonight was a celebration of innovation, a charity gala where the brightest minds in tech had gathered, hosted by none other than Nathaniel Cross, the young and formidable CEO of Crossnova Technologies. Nathan stood at the center of it all, like a young king surveying his court. His tailored black tuxedo framed his tall, commanding figure. Every handshake was a calculated alliance, every smile a move on the chessboard. Beside him stood Cassandra Wu, his radiant and powerful fiancée, only daughter of the global tech dynasty Wu Holdings. Dressed in a deep crimson silk gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, she was a living proclamation. "We are the future." "You've outdone yourself, darling," Cassandra whispered, her diamond-studded fingers brushing his sleeve. "That was the point," Nathan replied, his eyes drifting toward her father, Walter Wu, engaged in conversation with a U.S. senator. "You impressed the king to win the kingdom. Tonight wasn't just a charity event, it was the final act before the merger between Crossnova and Wu Holdings, a deal that would make Nathan one of the most powerful names in tech. Everything was unfolding perfectly, until he saw her. At first it was just a flicker of movement among the catering staff, a familiar silhouette, a tilt of the head he couldn't forget. And when the lights swept across her face, the world tilted. Lyra Quinn, the woman who once was his everything, the woman he left without looking back, all in pursuit of glory. She wore a simple server's uniform, her dark hair pulled into a neat bun. Her face looked thinner now, more tired. Yet in her eyes was something that pierced straight through him. And then he saw the impossible, a small swell beneath her uniform. Lyra was pregnant. All the sound drained from the room, the music, the laughter, the glasses clinking. None of it remained. Only her face, her eyes, and the single question that thundered through Nathaniel's mind. Is that my child? Before Crossnova, before the conferences, the spotlight, in the million-dollar contracts, there was a tiny apartment in Brooklyn. Each morning, sunlight slipped through faded curtains, glinting off the glass mug of herbal tea Lyra Quinn stirred gently, while Nathaniel Cross sipped his hand-brewed coffee and scanned finance articles. Back then, Nathan was just a software engineer, and Lyra had just completed her studies in herbal therapy. They shared a dream, to open a small bookshop and organic tea lounge, a quiet place where people could read, breathe, and heal. She dreamed of cedarwood shelves, handwritten tea labels, and customers who came not just for a drink, but for a moment of peace. He, though he chuckled at her tiny dream, was the first to sketch a logo, build a website, and draft a business plan with her, page by page. But everything shifted when Nathan got his first investment offer for a health tech AI platform. "It's just temporary," he said. "Once I'm settled, we'll get back to the tea shop." But temporary stretched into late nights, back-to-back meetings, pitch decks, and investor calls. Lyra became a silent presence behind the ever-glowing screen. "Do you remember the night we brainstormed names for the bookshop?" she asked one evening as he hung up a call. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "You should think bigger, Lyra. A tea shop won't change the world, but technology can." Lyra fell quiet, holding tightly to the notebook with the name Solace scrawled across the front, the name they once chose together. "So what you're saying is, I no longer belong in the world you're trying to change?" she asked, her voice trembling. That night, Nathan said the one sentence he would regret forever. "I can't fly if I'm carrying small dreams like that." The next day, Lyra left. No tears, no farewell, just the notebook and her ring. Nathan didn't run after her. In his mind, he believed he had done the right thing. Success demanded sacrifice. But now, seeing her again across the room, eyes dimmed and weary, Nathan understood. The cost had been too high, But dreams, no matter how abandoned, never truly die. They simply lie in wait, quiet and patient, until the moment they are seen again. That moment came the instant Nathaniel saw Lyra once more, beneath the glittering lights of a world she never belonged to. Nathaniel stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom, his gaze locked on Lyra as if the rest of the crowd had melted into a blurred, meaningless backdrop. The laughter, the music, the congratulatory toasts, everything dulled into distant echoes, unable to reach him anymore. She was pouring wine for a group of guests. Those hands, the same ones that used to warm his mornings with hand-brewed tea, now moved with quiet, practiced grace. Her face was still beautiful, but it bore the quiet erosion of time and hardship. And then he saw it, a slight swell beneath her uniform, small, subtle, unmistakable. Lyra was pregnant. His breath caught in his throat. In that instant, everything Nathan had built, his plans, his certainty, his empire, felt like sand shifting beneath his feet. How? When? Why didn't she say anything? Cassandra approached, champagne in hand. "Nathan, you look distracted. Is everything all right?" He turned quickly, trying to collect himself. "Just a bit tired," he said, but his face betrayed him. Cassandra tilted her head, narrowing her eyes with the intuition of someone raised among power plays and polished deception. She sensed something deeper than fatigue. Nathan excused himself from the crowd, his steps fast as he headed toward the side hallway. His heart thundered against his ribs. He needed to be sure. He needed to speak to her, just once. But when he turned back to scan the servers, identical uniforms, identical trays, Lyra was gone. No glance, no word, no trace. Only the question remained, echoing like a drumbeat in his mind. "Is that my child?" Nathaniel couldn't sleep that night. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling glass of his penthouse, staring at the city like a god who had lost control of his fate. So many times he'd believed he was winning, but now at the peak of it all, he felt utterly hollow. Lyra's face haunted him, the way she looked away, how she vanished without a word. Over and over, that moment replayed. The next morning, he called the event organizer, asking about the catering vendor. "Lena's table, sir. A last-minute replacement. No individual staff records," the woman replied. Fortunately, he got a number for the owner, a name he didn't recognize, Lena Mercado. He dialed. 3 rings. Then a blunt female voice answered, "Lena's table. Who's this?" "This is Nathaniel Cross. I need to speak with one of your staff, Lyra Quinn." A short silence, then a deep sigh. "Oh, it's you." Her voice turned to ice. "The billionaire suddenly remembers who he left behind? I just want to know if she's okay." "Okay?" Lena almost laughed. "She's broke, working 14-hour shifts just to make rent. And you? What did you do? Throw money like it could buy back dignity?" Nathan had no answer. No excuse could soften that truth. "Leave her alone," Lena said. "She doesn't need you. She doesn't want you." The call ended, but her words struck deeper than any blow. Unable to sit still, Nathan drove to the address he had quietly noted from the event logistics. The building was run down, paint peeling, windows cracked. It was hard to imagine the woman who once lit up his world was living here. He couldn't bring himself to knock. Instead, he pulled a thick stack of cash from his wallet, sealed it in a plain white envelope, and slipped it under her door. No name, no message, just an act that looked like help, but felt more like confession. That evening, Lyra returned home with aching feet and a sore back after a long shift. As she entered the apartment and set her bag down, she noticed a white envelope quietly lying on the floor, half tucked under the door. She opened it. Inside was a thick stack of cash. She didn't need a note. There was only one person in the world who believed problems could be fixed with money. For a moment, she stood still, fists tightening. She didn't cry. That phase of her life was over. Instead, Lyra tore the envelope, pulled the bills out, and threw them onto the table like each one was an insult. "I don't need your pity, Nathaniel," she whispered, voice raw. "I'm not someone to be saved. I'm someone who will rise, on her own." 2 days later, under the gray drizzle of October, Lyra was wiping tables at the small diner where she worked part-time when the bell above the door rang. She looked up, and her heart dropped. Nathaniel Cross, in a simple raincoat, hair damp from the cold rain, stood in the doorway. A man who had lost his way trying to find his way back. "What are you doing here?" Lyra's voice wasn't sharp, but it wasn't soft either. From behind the counter, Lena, her best friend and the diner's owner, stormed out. "We don't serve liars here. Get out." But Nathan didn't look at Lena. His eyes found only one person. "Lyra," he began, voice low and uncertain. "I'm sorry, that envelope, it was a mistake." "Yes, a big one," she replied coolly. "I didn't come to buy my way out. I didn't come to play savior." Her arms crossed. Doubt gleamed in her stare. "I know. Your last business, the organic line, it was your passion, and it had real potential." She said nothing. He pressed on. "I have experience. I know the market. I know why it didn't work the first time. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to help rebuild it. Not with money, but with my time and what I know." "Conditions?" she asked. "No conditions. No credit. No name on the label. You keep full ownership. I just want to be a consultant. If you'll have me." Lena crossed her arms, eyes narrowed. "I don't buy it." Lyra studied Nathan in silence. Then, "If I say yes, Lena's present at every meeting. No one-on-one, no side talks." He nodded without hesitation. "Agreed." That night, Lyra didn't sleep. Not because she didn't trust him, but because, deep down, she wanted to believe him again. Maybe not for her. Maybe for their child. A few days later, they met again in the diner after closing hours. Between them was a worn box filled with old receipts, failed invoices, a few leftover product samples, and a weathered notebook, its cover still marked with the word solace. Lyra opened it, a flicker of nostalgia and uncertainty in her eyes. "You think this can still work?" Nathan smiled, for the first time in years, a real smile. "Not just work, it can shine." They dove in. Nathan pointed out flaws in the previous model, misaligned marketing, pricing issues, brand confusion. Lyra, with her passion and ingredient expertise, pushed back, added ideas, expanded vision. In between debates, there were longer glances, softer smiles, silences that weren't awkward anymore, but peaceful. No one mentioned the baby. No one revisited the past. But in the quiet between them, something old had begun to grow again. That afternoon, pale sunlight filtered through the diner's foggy windows. Lyra and Nathan sat side by side, surrounded by sticky notes, brainstorming sketches, and half-used product samples. Their meeting was over. No tension, no pressure. Only the ticking of a wall clock and the soft scratch of a pen across paper remained. Nathan looked up and watched her. She was saying something about label designs, but her voice began to drift into the background. His gaze dropped slowly to her stomach, more pronounced now beneath her blouse. He drew in a breath. "Lyra," his voice was quiet but certain, "I need to ask you something." She lifted her head. Her face was calm, not guarded, just waiting. "Is the baby mine?" Silence wrapped around them. Lena, wiping down the counter in the distance, paused, ears tilted toward them. Lyra didn't flinch, didn't look away. She simply placed a hand on her belly, instinctively, protectively. Then she nodded. "Yes, the baby is yours." Nathan sat back slightly, the weight of the world shifting on his shoulders. His throat tightened. He wanted to ask 1,000 things. "When did you know? Why didn't you tell me? How long have you been carrying this alone?" But he said nothing, because deep down, he knew he had no right to ask. Lyra held his gaze. Her voice was steady, not cold, just quiet. "I knew I could have told you, but I also knew that if I did, you'd feel obligated. And I don't want my child to grow up in a house where love feels like a duty." Nathan felt those words cut through him, but he understood, and he agreed. "I don't need redemption," she continued. "I need truth. And if you're here, I need to know you'll stay not out of guilt, but out of love." Nathan looked at her, his eyes soft with gratitude and regret. He nodded, not to promise, but to acknowledge this child was his blood, child. "And Lyra, She was the one he lost once. The truth had been spoken, but with it came a new door, leading to a storm neither of them saw coming. As Nathaniel began to face what it meant to be a father, elsewhere, a different fire was quietly being lit. Rumors move fast in the tech world, like sparks finding dry grass. Nathaniel Cross, the rising star, was reportedly working on a venture with a mysterious former flame. Gossip magazines whispered about a pregnant ex, while in the investment circle, Lyra Quinn's name resurfaced, shrouded in speculation. Cassandra Wu, always poised on magazine covers with her signature smile, began sensing the shift. Something had changed, in Nathan's eyes, in the way he left work earlier now, and most of all, in his growing silence. One evening, she stepped into his home office, the war room as he once called it, and found a folder left open on the desk. Written in blue ink, she saw the name, Solace Organics. Her eyes narrowed. She had seen that name before, in an old collection of product ideas, her own supposedly. The next morning, Cassandra hired a private investigator. Within a week, she had photos. Nathan and Lyra walking out of a meeting, smiling, a casual touch on the arm, a glance that lingered too long, and finally the photo of Lyra, visibly pregnant. She didn't need any explanation, but what hurt more than personal betrayal was the professional violation. Cassandra went through her archived emails and concept drafts from the early development of Everpure, the flagship brand she had built. In one PDF marked Sample Concept, she began to read. Chamomile tea extract, cold fermented lavender oil, hand-processed infusions. Every ingredient matched what she'd once seen, in Lyra's handwritten notes from a notebook labeled Solace. A notebook she had casually borrowed and never returned. At the time, it was just an inspiring reference. But now, with Lyra's baby, with Nathan's eyes, it was stolen legacy. Cassandra's fists clenched, her nails digging into her palms. She had no intention of losing, and definitely not to some failed ex-girlfriend with a sob story. Across the city, Lyra was blending a new toner sample when the bell above the shop door rang. Lena rushed in, phone in hand, eyes wide. "You won't believe this," Lena said. "Everpure, Cassandra's brand, just announced a new formula, and it's almost identical to the one we worked on yesterday." Lyra gripped the glass bottle tightly, not from fear of competition, but because she knew someone had been stealing her dream, one ingredient at a time. Inside the executive office of Wu Holdings, soft golden light reflected off the glass walls, casting the silhouettes of three people: Cassandra, Nathaniel, and Walter Wu. The air was frozen. Cassandra sat at the head of the table, posture upright, pride stripped away, and replaced by hurt buried beneath crimson lipstick. "I want an explanation," she said, placing a folder of photographs on the table. Images of Nathan and Lyra, smiles, glances, a hand gently touching his sleeve. Nathan didn't look at the photos. He looked only at Cassandra. "I won't deny it." Walter leaned back, eyes narrowed. "Do you understand what this does to the deal? Your personal involvement with that woman is alarming shareholders." "She's not just a former partner," Nathan said quietly. "She's the mother of my child." The room fell dead silent. Cassandra turned away. Her lips trembled. Walter exhaled sharply. "Nathaniel, we invested in you not just for your tech, but for your image, your stability, your future with Cassandra. If that image is compromised, then—" He didn't have to finish. Cassandra looked directly at him, voice trembling but clear. "You choose me and the life you've built, or her, and you lose everything." Nathan looked at her. A part of him wanted to be sorry, for he knew Cassandra had once loved him. But the other part, the one that had awakened the moment he saw Lyra again, already knew the answer. "I choose my child," he said, "and the woman I should have never left in the first place." Within 48 hours of Wu Holdings pulling out of the merger, both financial outlets and tabloid sites exploded with headlines. Wall Street Standard, front page read, "Man gives up $1 billion for his ex." On social media, hashtags like "Watch Cross Collapse" and "Watch CEO Be Heart" went viral. Some praised Nathaniel for choosing family, but the majority accused him of recklessness, emotional weakness, and self-sabotage. Even late-night talk shows featured analysts dissecting his fall from grace. One commentator quipped, "You can't build a future if you're still chasing your past." Three major investment firms withdrew funding. Two strategic partners terminated their contracts within a week. Cross Nova stock plummeted from $123 to $68 in just 5 days, the steepest drop in the company's history. Shareholders called for an emergency meeting. A petition circulated demanding Nathan's resignation for the sake of the brand. He read every word, no rebuttal, no press statement. Because to Nathaniel Cross, losing everything was no longer scarier than continuing to live a lie. Headlines branded Nathan as impulsive, unprofessional, emotionally reckless. He said nothing in return. Nathan resigned as CEO, sold most of his shares to pay debts, and kept just enough to start over, not with an empire, but with a real life. One early winter afternoon, Nathan stood outside Lyra's apartment with a bag of pastries and a canvas tote filled with the first samples of Solace Organics. The door opened. Lyra looked at him, thinner but changed. "You're not a CEO anymore, huh?" she asked. He shook his head, smiling. "Nope. I deliver packages now for a stubborn, small-batch beauty brand owned by the toughest woman I know." Lyra laughed, the first laugh he'd heard from her in years. He no longer owned an empire, but for the first time in his life, Nathaniel Cross had a family. When the headlines moved on from the name Nathaniel Cross, that was when he truly began again. He sold his car, liquidated his remaining stocks at a loss, shut down his luxury office space, and moved out of the penthouse that once symbolized his success. He kept only a few personal items, a faded photo with Lyra, an old notebook, and the first sample bottle from their new product line. Nathan rented a modest apartment in Brooklyn, just 5 blocks from Lyra's place. No mansions, no concierge, no personal assistant. But every morning, carrying his bag of raw ingredients on foot to the small Solace Organics workspace, he felt more alive than ever. At first, Lyra was cautious, but eventually she got used to seeing him there every day, not as a fallen CEO, but as a real co-founder. They woke early to pick out fresh herbs at the farmer's market, crafted formulas together, packed every order by hand, and argued a lot. "You can't use that much essential oil. It'll trigger sensitive skin," Lyra warned sternly. "But if there's no scent, it won't make an impression," Nathan replied. "We're not selling fragrance. We're selling gentleness." He laughed. "You're right, as always." Solace Organics, the dream once abandoned in a rush toward glory, was now reborn with purpose. They chose a simple slogan: from healing hearts to healing skin. No loud ads, no influencer campaigns, just quiet, steady growth through word of mouth. Their customers, those with allergic reactions, post-treatment skin, or just looking for honesty in a world of chemicals, found solace not because of branding, but because they felt seen. And they stayed, because each product told a real story of loss, regret, and a love strong enough to begin again. One afternoon, Lyra looked around their small workshop, shelves half empty, orders increasing. Nathan was labeling boxes, his face covered in starch. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. He looked up, smiled. "Regret what?" "Giving up the empire." Nathan wiped his hands, walked over, and gently touched her rounded belly. "I didn't give up the empire," he said softly. "I just moved it to where it always belonged." In their tiny herb-scented workshop, they believed the past had finally been laid to rest. But elsewhere, the woman who once thought she was untouchable was preparing her final strike. It was a spring morning, just as the first buds were breaking through the damp earth. Sunlight filtered through the windows of Solace Organics, catching the glass serum bottles lined up like quiet soldiers. But today, the shop was closed because Lyra was in labor. At a small hospital in Brooklyn, no cameras, no luxury SUVs, there was only the steady beep of heart monitors, the focused voices of nurses, and the sharp, rhythmic breath of a woman about to become a mother. Nathan held her hand for hours. In his eyes once trained on contracts and valuations, there was now fear, faith, and the rawest kind of love. He had never felt so small in the face of something so immense. And then at last, a cry. Loud, strong, a tiny life, wrinkled, red, fragile, yet more beautiful than anything he had ever built. A nurse swaddled the baby and placed her in his arms. "Congratulations, Dad." Nathan took her, hands trembling slightly. He stared down at that little face, the curved lips, the delicate lashes, the tiny fingers stretching instinctively for warmth. A cottony bundle that somehow held the entire universe. Lyra smiled through her exhaustion. "Her name is Aurora, the first light after the longest night." Nathan didn't speak. He simply leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers. And in that moment he knew, not a startup, not shares, not fame. This was his true empire, one that needed no IPO, no funding rounds, just love, presence, and the promise to never walk away again. Aurora's arrival was a miracle, and a quiet reminder that they were no longer fighting just for themselves. Because just as joy began to bloom, a greater challenge was already waiting quietly around the corner. One early summer morning, Lyra opened an email from Prime & Pure, one of the largest natural beauty retail chains in the US. The subject line was short: "Congratulations, Solace Organics has been shortlisted for this year's strategic partnership." She thought she had misread it. This was a national distribution deal, the kind of dream she never dared imagine. When Nathan heard the news, he paused, then wrapped her in a quiet embrace. "You did it, Lyra. You really did it." "I know, but within the proposal packet, one name stood out. Everpure, CEO, Cassandra Wu." No words were needed. They both knew. This wasn't just a pitch. It was a real battle. The following week was sleepless. Solace Organics worked late into the night, preparing every line of the bid. Product breakdowns, logistics, sustainability models. But the most important piece wasn't on paper. It was the story behind each bottle. Nathan suggested a short documentary, a video chronicling Lyra's journey, from failure to rebirth, from loss to restoration. "Let them see more than product," he said. "Let them see why it exists." Lyra hesitated. "You think people will care about my cracks?" "People don't trust faceless brands, Lyra, but they believe in truth, and you are that truth." Presentation day arrived. At Prime & Pure headquarters, two companies stood ready to pitch. Everpure went first, with polished slides, flashy visuals, and a PR team in matching suits. When it was Solace Organics' turn, the room fell quiet. Lyra stepped onto the stage. No heels, no designer blazer. Just a woman in a simple cotton dress, standing steady in front of a panel. She didn't start with profit margins. She didn't talk about growth projections. She played a video. It showed their tiny workshop, real hands mixing ingredients, soft baby laughter in the background, and finally, Nathan cradling Aurora beside rows of lavender-filled shelves. She said only one sentence afterward: "We don't create products to sell. We create them to heal, because once we needed healing too." When the presentation ended, no one spoke, but the looks on their faces had shifted. Later that afternoon, the email arrived. Prime & Pure has chosen Solace Organics as its strategic partner, not because of a bigger budget, not because of higher margins, but because a true story had touched something real. Winning the Prime & Pure partnership took Solace Organics to a turning point. For the first time, it felt real. Orders doubled, customers wrote personal letters, and Lyra caught Nathan once dancing in the workshop with Aurora in his arms. They didn't say it aloud, but both believed. Maybe they'd made it. But it also brought a quiet storm. Cassandra said nothing, but in the industry, silence sometimes speaks the loudest. A week later, an anonymous article surfaced titled, "When Failures Learn to Tell Stories." It accused Solace Organics of emotional marketing, using hardship as branding, and bypassing industry standards through pity. There was no doubt who was behind it. Lena was furious. Nathan suggested legal action. But Lyra simply stared at the screen, then turned it off. "We don't need to shout," she said. "We just need to speak our truth in our own voice." 3 days later, a letter appeared on the official Solace Organics website. No dramatic headlines, no names mentioned, just words. Soft, real, and raw. Like pages from an open journal, some wounds are invisible, but still need healing. "I once lost everything. An idea, a child who never arrived, and faith in myself. But I started again, from tiny dropper bottles, handwritten formulas, and trembling hands packing single orders. Solace wasn't born to compete. It was born to remind us that even when you feel unseen, you still matter. We're not perfect, but we are kind, and we're here because you deserve to be cared for by something real. Within 24 hours, the letter went viral. Skincare forums, women's groups, and longtime customers flooded social media. Hashtags like Jupper's Real Care, Chucker's Solace Story, Chucker's Gentle by Heart trended widely. A New York Times beauty editor wrote, "In a world where brands scream to be heard, Solace chose to whisper." And so, people listened. Even those who'd never tried the products sent messages of gratitude, not for what it did to their skin, but for how it made them feel seen. Cassandra read the letter from her glass office, sleek, quiet, and distant. She closed the screen. Behind her, the city lights blinked, cold and uncaring. For once, power had nothing left to say, and kindness, quiet, persistent, unbought, had the final word. Hey, if you're still here, maybe, just maybe, something in this story touched your heart. I don't have much, just quiet words and moments shared. But you're the reason I keep going. Please hit that subscribe button. Don't just disappear like a passing breeze. Your presence, even a single click, tells me I'm not telling these stories alone. I still have so many beautiful and meaningful stories waiting to be told, and I hope to share them with you. See you in the next story. Wishing you a peaceful day filled with love.